Hello and welcome back to Speed Demon Painting. Today we are taking a closer look at what has changed for the Commonwealth in the Order of Battle version 3.04. The general video, including all of the changes that affect everyone, has already been made, and I refer to that one in the comments below, where you can find a link to that video if you want to check out the very short version of it. This is a more detailed guide, but it is not quite an ORBAT deep dive. I am trying to just go over what has been buffed, what has been nerfed in this one, and what has pretty much stayed the same. If you do want to see the full ORBAT deep dive for the Commonwealth though, that will probably be done in about a month's time when these beta ORBATs will be finalized and fully fleshed out. So if you want to see that, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel for when that time comes. The first important change is a change to the rail quality. This now includes SRS tokens. It was very weird that some of the stacks from SRS before had this quality, but it never really did anything. It's still -1 Citadel against actions that have this quality, however it now includes SRS tokens as well. But because that can get out of hand really quickly, it has been capped to a maximum of +3 when you are attacking skimming and aerial units. On the plus side, it is also a maximum of -3 when you are attacking something with the Submerged trait as well, so you're not completely left hanging if you're trying to attack those with a rail quality weapon too. A good change overall, and it really makes the SRS game of the Commonwealth quite a bit stronger. Even though this ORBAT has the acceptable attrition rule in it, make no mistake, there is not a single unit in here that has it, mostly because quantity is a quality is a rule that just allows you to keep spawning them, and that would get out of hand and very frustrating that you're not getting rewards for it with little Rurik squadrons. So it's in here, but don't go looking for it. The rail quality goes along with the Cometa railgun rule here. It's been clarified that this rule does not apply when you're making a torpedo attack though, so it's only really when making your regular attacks. It's still only against mass 1 targets, but those really start to get shredded with those SRS tokens from the Commonwealth, thanks to these two qualities, lowering both the Citadel, and quite often those attacks have piercing as well, so yeah, good luck surviving that one, and you really don't want to go up with skimming mass 1s or flying mass 1 ships against the Commonwealth, because they can make short work of it using their SRS tokens. Another change affecting the Commonwealth is the change to the temperamental design. When you're making repair rolls with this unit, you need 2 successes to be able to remove a critical damage marker. And the Commonwealth does have a few ships with experimental or temperamental design, I should say, including some of the Ukrainian units and the Markov's Prometheus as well. So be wary that that has changed as well. In terms of the battle fleets available to the Commonwealth, there have been a few changes as well. Not so much to the Russian frontline squadrons and the well-known ones, but the Russian support squadron has gotten a boost. It can now include at least 1 submerged unit, and those submerged units must have the Commonwealth trait. This is a welcome new addition because you'll see that a lot of the Colossi, the Marina and the Kostroma, have changed to be submerged, so this is probably why this change is in there now. So in other words, you can get bigger Russian support battle fleets should you so desire. There is also a minor change to the Ukrainian battle fleet, that you don't just have to take an Akula class with, it needs to be an Akula class with a Ukrainian trait. I don't really consider this a nerf though, this is more of a cleanup of what it used to be. The Caspian battle fleet has been slightly redesigned in its bonus as well. It used to have strategic reserves, but a lot of the units that you take in it traditionally didn't even want to be in reserves to begin with, like the Alexeyev class, the Murmansk class. These are all things that you kind of wanted to have on the board, especially the Mosaiski class. So for now, it actually has a bonus to the Caspian overthrust rule, giving you another +1 inch in speed if you take this one. So a rather useless bonus got replaced with something slightly more useful. Of course, the biggest advantage of this fleet still is the fact that you do not have to take any surface units, but you can start with the skimming units instead. The Icebreaker battle fleet has gotten a nifty little change. They can also include that Submerged unit. Again, a change mostly to compensate for what has happened to the Marina and Kostroma, but it is now straight up buffed for what you can do with the cryo generators. You can now roll 2 dice and discard 1 die. It used to be a reroll, meaning your results could have been worse. Now you can just roll 2 and pick the best, so yeah, you can actually make a few more icebergs with these. Nice. And then, the tiniest of small nerfs for the Black Wolf mercenary battle fleet. You can no longer include Russian unique units in there. It makes no sense whatsoever from a narrative point of view that one of the legendary unique units such as the 3 Bogatyr would suddenly just start associating themselves with some ragtag mercenaries in such a demeaning kind of fashion. So it needs to be, generic ships for this one. Also, Black Wolf Mercenary is a bit buffed, but we'll talk about that when we get to the patrons. And here we are with the patrons. So, if you wanted to take a patron, you can take always these Russian names: Tsarevna Anastasia Ruriknovi, the Wolf's Bride, which means that you can go for a full Black Wolf fleet if you so desire for 1 victory point. There is a caveat though: the Black Wolf rule allows you to reroll blanks in any action dice pool, which is an amazing rule in and of itself, but you need more victory points than your opponent, and that is always determined at the first check for victory step, which doesn't happen until the tail end of turn 1. And if you take this rule, that means that you probably will have to have scored at least 2 victory points, and preferably your opponent none, before you can actually start using the real benefits to having these mercenaries in the game. The cool thing is that you can do it, but you do have to do something quite inspiring early on in the game to really make the most out of these mercenaries, so that is definitely something you have to keep in the back of your head as well. And if you ask me, Victor Blomqvist, the White Navy Aerial Admiral, is one of the better ones. It's 3 victory points that you have to pay, so that is quite a big deal. But any battle fleet, except for mercenary ones, in your force have their restriction altered to allow for an additional aerial unit with a Commonwealth trait to be included. And spoiler alert, the aerial units have been buffed quite significantly, so this can get quite fun. That's not the strongest thing yet though, because you wouldn't pay 3 victory points for that. The big thing is that 1 flagship unit in the force just straight up gains the Fortunes of War special rule on top of that. So no more having to take some special ship just to get Fortunes of War. If you take this guy, you have it already. Quite strong if you ask me. Another one quite strong is the other one that allows you to take during the upkeep phase of each round. Just straight up remove all the levels of disorder from models in a single Commonwealth unit in your force. Now this is not going to be as useful against every single force out there, but if you're going up against an Empire player or even one of the Pipeworks units from the Union, that is really going to hurt, because those units really do rely on putting disorder on you. So yeah, quite a handy little patron. Also quite handy if you're taking a Ukrainian force, because they also have a lot of those temperamental designs, and so you really don't want to be spending too much of your repair rolls on removing their disorder as well, which is a great little patron to have, Imo. Right, now we're making a jump to the very last page of the Commonwealth, because a lot of the things that have been buffed and nerfed will make more sense when we are talking about the Commonwealth weapon reference. There's not a ton of changes, but there are 2 quite significant ones. The first one being the Katyusha rocket salvo. The Katyusha has gained a very respectable 3 dice in the lead weapon value, meaning that the first ship I'll be discussing is actually going to get a significant buff in its firepower. It's less of a bonus, of course, in the crippled state, but to be honest, this weapon system didn't lose that many dice anyway, and now it has as much lead value in the crippled state as it had before in its regular state, so that is a really big upgrade there. And another one that cannot be understated is the Humble Seismic Mortar has been buffed with a +1 dice in its lead value as well. There were quite a few ships that were sort of locked, and if you bought some of the older sprues that were locked with a single seismic mortar, And this weapon now has been bumped up a bit only in its lead value, so don't expect to get like a ridiculous amount of extra dice if you're using smaller Rurik frigates, for instance. But if you had one of those ships that just had it molded into it, it's less of a big deal if you are stuck, quote unquote, if you want to play what you see is what you get with a seismic mortar. And another not quite an unimportant tweak, and I skipped over it until now, is the seismic mortar itself. As a valor effect, before targets are declared using this weapon, all of your seismic mortars in the unit can gain the devastating quality, meaning you can get some pretty nifty attacks out of them as well if you do decide to spam them into small Rurik units. Right then, enough about weapon systems, let's go to the flagships, and yeah, also a bit of a spoiler alert, the Commonwealth is doing really well in this department. The first one is the Alexeyev Ekranoplan Heavy Transport. Now, first of all, it has lost a Katyusha salvo, but that one is largely compensated by the stats increase that we've seen before. This one doesn't have heavy firepower, thank God, because otherwise you'd really have one hell of a Katyusha rocket salvo coming your way, and I guess that's not really needed. It did get a small nerf though, because it is now a lumbering vessel. As a compensation, you did get some extra speed in their stats, so it's not exactly been slower or has become slower, but lumbering has that big downside as well of being targeted with gunnery weapons, so you have to take that into account. All of it does come with a nice little minus 25 point reduction, so overall I would say the Alexeyev is in a better position than it was before. Now, if you were looking at the Borodino battleship, you first sight wouldn't have many changed things, except for this small little addition below. It can now be taken into squadrons of 2s, and that has some major repercussions because Borodinos are quite difficult to take down as it is. It's also gained an extra hull point in its crippled state, so quite a beefy little thing, and now there's 2 of them. It's getting out of hand. That means that if you want to get your flagship kill bonus for Borodinos, you'd have to be putting down 2 of them if they come in pairs, and if one of them survives, which is more likely to happen of course, you are almost guaranteed to get a victory point at the end of the game as a compensation as well, so I really like this squadron option. Looks like a tough nut to crack though if you're not sitting on the correct side of the table, but yeah, you know, that's a problem for the opponent. Other than the change in hull points in the crippled state, there are no changes though to the name variants. It's not like you can take those in squadrons, so yeah, they got a minor buff, which is a good thing. Continuing on this theme of getting some extra hull points in the crippled state, the same thing has happened to the Moskva heavy battleship. As far as these sort of heavy battleships go, at 311 points, along with focused gunnery, I still very much like this ship. There is an overall change to swapping out generators, by the way, that is mentioned here. For 5 points reduction, you can now take a generator. I would never do that with this ship, but you'll see that as a change throughout this whole ORBAT, so I'm not going to mention it every single time. The Mosaiski fleet carrier is now 5 points extra, so a bit of a nerf there, but also benefits from another +1 in its crippled profile. What is new though, and a lot of players were asking for this, is the option to change out the rocket batteries for either seismic mortars for free, gun batteries or rail guns for +5 points. You'd almost have to be a bit soft in the head to go for a gun battery if you ask me, but yeah, there we go. The seismic mortar definitely is a fun one, but a Commonwealth expert, I haven't found that one on a plastic sprue yet. That might be a sort of thing to come in the future, we'll see. Now here's an entry that was disappointing time and time again whenever I fielded it, and that was the Murmansk mobile stronghold. It has gotten a very significant 40 points reduction though, which is a good thing. Overall, these big ships in quite a lot of the ORBATS have gone down a bit in price and in points because, you know, they are cool to have on the table, so why not just reduce their price point? And for the Murmansk, it was a bit too expensive. Straight up, so plus or minus 40 points very much changes that. And the repair facilities has gotten a nice +2 point bump. So yeah, hopefully we'll see this unit getting a bit more play. You definitely do not take it for the increase in firepower, you're mostly taking it for a supply depot, logistical support and the advanced repair facilities, so it's gotten better in that department as well, at a reduced cost. Let's hope we'll see more of them. If you're looking for changes in the Presidium command ship, there's not that many of them. It's got the traditional +1 hull point in the crippled state. And it's got now infrasound detectors. That's just a rename because that is now the generic rule that is used throughout all ORBATS, which used to be a thing that was first seen in the Presidium. So it's sort of a reduction in a bunch of specific bespoke rules, I suppose. Everyone loves the Richter artillery dreadnought, and that one hasn't really changed except for the +1 hull points in the crippled state as well. The Tobolsk mobile stronghold, however, has seen a significant -60 point reduction to bring it to 435 points. Taking into account how the SRS has gotten significantly better at hunting down Mass 1 ships, the more limited 5.3 capacity is actually quite a good thing as well. So overall, again, hopefully we'll see more of these iconic Doom Donuts showing up in the open oceans near you. Similar sort of story for the Anastasia. It's gotten -50 points reduction, so hopefully that'll help to see a few more of them. And especially now when more and more mercenary-only fleets are becoming an option, it's good to see that. The Deathbringer has received a small new buff because the Breaker of Bows is an ability that made it score additional victory points each time it destroyed a unit through a ramming action. They've actually added an assault action to that as well. Great thing because, like I said, if you're a mercenary faction, getting more victory points than your opponent is a pretty big deal, and with Fray 15, there's nothing to sort of joke at. That is a very respectable amount. You're actually going to see Breaker of Bows kick in more often. Onto the surface units next. The Boyar Heavy Frigate actually has got a significant nerf, if you ask me. It now needs to pay for its rocket battery change. The rocket battery change was a given in the previous ORBAT because you really do want to have all of your small guns matching up, but you now have to pay 5 points for it. There is a small thing that needs to be mentioned though with the Boyar Heavy Frigate. It can still take 4 additional models, which is a bit of an indirect buff because most factions saw a reduction in the amount of destroyers and heavy frigates that they can take, and it is not the case for the Boyar Heavy Frigate. So yeah, more expensive, still good if you ask me, but nerfed. No two ways about it. The platforms all over, not just the Khan, have not seen any changes, so I'm not going to go over those now. What has changed, rather significantly, is the Katango Cryo Assault Cruiser. It's become cheaper, they've knocked off 4 points off of it, but it comes with quite a bit of a reduction in the stat line as well. It's now even cheaper than the Morosco, but as you can see, it's lost a hull point, small amount, so a bit of a nerf despite the points cost reduction. It has also lost a point of Citadel and it has lost a point of SDV. Overall though, it now sort of fits in better with the other heavy cruisers like the Norlisk and the Morosco, so it's a bit fewer stats for you to remember if there is an upside that I'm looking for, but yeah, bit of a nerf. The good old Kutsov has remained the same, but not really, because there's a small buff. They can now come into squadrons of 3, which is a significant thing. So the Kutsov itself hasn't changed, but if you want to field really big units of them, you now can. And at 90 points per model, a unit of 4 would still set you back only 320 points, and that really is a tough nut to crack for your opponent, so definitely worth trying to take some of them now. I actually still have some frontline sprues, so a few other Kutsovs are going to be built soon. For the Krikun, Shockwave Frigate and Markov's Prometheus, we're not really seeing any changes, although you do have to make a small note that Markov's Prometheus has seen a small nerf due to temperamental design change. So if you're fielding that one, you'd rather pair it up with something with advanced repair facilities, otherwise you're going to have a hard time keeping it operating, because if it now suffers a generator shutdown, it really does hurt. The Morosco has seen a small little buff. Its defense values have gone off, and that's not the big buff. The big buff, though, is the fact that they now get heavy broadsides, meaning that they are more in line with the Norlisk as well, meaning that those units are sort of closer together now, with no real obvious standout between them. And of course the named variant, the 3 Bogatyr, that have Pack Hunter to go along with everything as well, have also gotten heavy broadsides, so expect to see some really devastating broadsides if these manage to get within point blank range of you, which is a good thing. The normal Nordisk is now more in line with the rest of them, no real changes there, but again with the tweaks to the other one, I think they're actually worth considering a bit more. When it comes to the Oleg monitor, it's gotten a small change that it now has shallow draught as well. Terrain, if you get too close to it these days, that actually causes you to get some disorder tokens, so that is a buff, but make note of it. Not something that makes you go like, oh, build a bunch of Olegs now, but something noteworthy. The Pravda support carrier, despite the fact that the SRS have gotten significantly better, has seen a reduction of 5 points as well, which is a good thing if you want to sort of play a lot with SRS tokens to the Commonwealth. Ironically, I think their faction lore said that they weren't quite convinced yet by a lot of SRS tokens, but they sure have gotten good at it for not being too convinced by them. The humble little Rurik frigate has been buffed with the change to the seismic mortar. Let's start off with that one first, but it has been buffed in a second way as well. You can now attach it to a Russian flagship, should you so desire, for if it has 4 models or less. So they are better when they're being attached to something. However, I think they were loath to change it to 4 Rurik frigates because you don't want to get it spiraling out of control with the number of frigates with quality, or quantity is a quality of its own, I suppose. So that's why it's a bit of a weird unit when it comes to attaching them to something. Overall though, significant buff for the Ruriks, so a good show. The Sinews hasn't really changed as well, it's still one of the better units, and the Subutai battle platform is also much the same as it was before. So overall, not that many changes to the surface units, just small things to remark, but the skimming units sure as hell have gotten better. Unfortunately, we are starting with the Dragunov Ekranoplan Brawler, which has just gotten slightly more expensive, sadly, than it was before. It now standard comes equipped with rocket batteries, which makes a lot more sense when you think about the actual sprue that they come with. The sprue doesn't come with any gun batteries whatsoever, but rather rocket batteries, and so that has been changed. You'll see that happening with quite a few of these skimmers as well, such as the Guyana Shockwave hovercraft, which has been reduced in points, however, and now baseline comes with 2 rocket batteries rather than the gun battery. This is a good thing, because if you really were set on using gun batteries, it is now a free upgrade, so there's no real changes to you there. In fact, with the baseline reduction of 6 points, and then the rocket batteries no longer having to be taken as an upgrade, I would say that this ship has seen a significant little buff that is almost 9 points per model, which is a really good deal now. There's always a bit of a, these against the name escapes me, but the small Rurik option with the Guyana Shockwave generator. This one only goes up to 4 models though, so you have to take in mind that if your opponent manages to shoot down 2 of them, your big unit is going to only shoot with a small torrent template. That's something that the Rurik variant of it doesn't have, so I always find this one an interesting choice between the 2 of them. And by that I mean this one gets way more firepower with the two small weapon systems, but the shockwave generator itself isn't quite as strong as it is with the traditional Mass 1 ship variant. And the next one is one that breaks a nerf streak, lasting almost 6 ORBATS, I believe. It's the Stolotov Ekranoplane Harrier. Why do I say this one is buffed? Well, not only is the Katyusha salvo now significantly stronger, it can now take up to 3 additional models. Which is, I thought I had a full unit of Stolotov Ekranoplane Harriers. Well, now they've added a 5th one to it potentially, so I'm going to have to paint an extra one up. Of those up as well, but you know, if that's the worst thing that can happen in life. This one is significant though. 5 of these Ekranoplan Harriers shooting at you with Katyusha salvos, that's really gonna sting. You're going to notice that because the torpedo salvos are there as well. They also almost double as traditional hunter submarines. So yeah, very much looking forward to these. It's an iconic unit, you want to see it on the table, so if you're facing the Commonwealth, I'm not even mad about it. Similarly to the Guyana, the Yak transport hovercraft, it says 80 points, but didn't note anything, because I think that's a mistake that it's in blue. It has been buffed though, because it now also comes baseline with the rocket batteries, and that used to be something that you pay 6 extra points for. It also says up to 2 additional models, but I was double checking the old ORBAT and that is no change at all, so I think there's just some blue font in here that shouldn't be there. When it comes to the Zuber Destroyer hovercraft, you're really seeing a points reduction, because again, it's been brought down by 6 points. All of the weapon options are pretty much gone now. You would have paid up to 6 extra points for the upgrades to rocket batteries, which you would want to take anyway. I don't mind the weapon options being gone, because you'd have to be a bit soft in the head to not take rocket batteries, really, when one is mandatory. So do away with it and actually make it a nice little 9 points reduction per model. That was very much needed, because a fully upgraded Zuber Destroyer hovercraft was almost as expensive as an Oleg, and yeah, that's a bit too stiff a competition within the same ORBAT. When it comes to the submerged units, there are now the Akula Grand Submarines, who are 210 points, so that's a reduction of 10 points, and you can now actually take an additional model at a cost of 210 points per model. That's a big deal, because it's very similar to what we saw with the Borodinos. These things can become flagships, should you want to, and that means that you have to cripple and destroy the entire unit to get bonuses out of it, so this is a bigger buff than you might expect. And also, let's be honest, you got quite a few of these Akula Grand Submarines, so the ability to now field them as squadrons is very much a good thing. The Kizak attack submarine didn't change at all, which is something I still can't believe, because 55 points for a thing that fires a heavy torpedo salvo as the main gun and then gets a regular rocket battery on top of that is criminally low. You're paying a lot for 60 points for the first one. It doesn't stand up to any type of firepower whatsoever. It's borderline a Mass 1 in that regard, but when it comes to getting a lot of torpedo firepower, this is still one of the strongest units in the game. Things that have changed considerably, though, are the big mechs for the Commonwealth. The first one being the Kostroma Vitruvian Colossus. Right off the bat, it has lost an impressive 12 points, and it got the Mag Rail Axe. It's also gained a little bit of hull points in the crippled state. Now, overall, if you're a submarauder, it almost doesn't matter how many hull points you have, because you're destroying them in order to continue, unless of course it is the very last model. It's nice to get +1 there, but it's not the biggest thing. There has been a buff to the Razres as well, because now you need to use a Valor card of 30 plus, which is less than you'd expect, and your opponent cannot automatically try to cancel it, so definitely this ability has gotten quite a bit better. I was following along with a bit of discussion in the Discord, and some people were saying the Kostroma Vitruvian Colossus doesn't seem like a good option. Why would you not take the Marina? It has a much better ram and everything. But to be honest, I could see this one still functioning quite well within a list. My main faction is of course the Imperium, and I'm absolutely scared shitless about this one particular entry. Because just because you're a Submarauder doesn't mean that you have to start the game in your Submarauder position. This one now has a mag rail axe, railgun, and sharpshooter. It's knocking 3 points off of the Citadel. If this unit is shooting at something like my Zeppelin class, which has gotten a points reduction, that's definitely there, but it would drop down to a Citadel of just 9, with 17 shots now, 17 dice now in the railgun department. That also has Giant Slayer on top. I'm really fearful of my big balloons. In fact, any of the new flying ships are going to have to really be scared by this unit. And it is incredibly flexible, because with its cryo generator it can also really put the hurt on any of the small ships trying to infiltrate your backline. And so I think this one has changed its role completely. Just sitting at the back, shooting, and then when your opponent gets close, it can still use its mag rail axe to start acting like Submarauders and start clearing out that back line where your opponent is trying to break through. So it's definitely an interesting unit if you ask me. I'm quite pleased to see all of these changes. The other one that has straight up has gotten a big nerf, but one that is in line with what has happened in a lot of factions, so it was to be expected, is the Marina Vitruvian Colossus. It did drop 5 points, so it's actually one of the cheaper ramming bots out there, if I'm not mistaken, which is good, because, you know, its regular gun batteries aren't exactly something to write home about, and it's not like it can start shooting extra with its flamethrower like the Kostroma was able to do. But the Davka has now changed. It no longer allows for a double ram. We've checked this as well as war hosts. That is completely intentional. It's something that we saw in a lot of factions though, so you know, don't beat yourself up over it. The ability to ram twice is now restricted to just, if I'm not mistaken, the Prussian bot. So they're the only ones getting it, and their weapon was significantly nerfed because they could do so. So now it has a Valor effect for the ram, and it can use its fist to grab an initial target within 3 inch and make a ramming action using the Semenov assault bore, getting a significant +10 action dice bonus, regardless of any ramming distance. So this thing can pop up out of nowhere. It doesn't really need to get a bit of a run going, meaning that screening against these guys is next to impossible. You mustn't forget, the new Submarauder forces you to put a token down and then your Submarauder in the first turn, and then your Submarauder has to come into it. That opens up a bunch of opportunities for your opponent to effectively screen the juicier targets with mass 1 ships, and there's so that the Submarauder cannot get a good ramming bonus by picking up a lot of speed. There's no defending against that with the Marina, so it's still one of the more effective rammers, but overall it has seen one of the nerfs that were overall applied to Submarauder rammers in general. The Piranha Hunter submarine has been nerfed slightly, but that was also in line with what we've seen happening with other ORBATS. It can now only take 3 extra models, so enormous opening salvos with torpedoes have been reduced a bit. But again, don't stress too much, you still have the Stolotov option as well, now also clocking in at 5 models, so that's a pretty good thing. In terms of the flyers, the Irkutsk Skydrill hasn't really changed. There's a bit blue text here with the infrasound detector, which is now a general rule across all factions, so nothing really has changed there. The Saransk Sky Furnace, if anything, is buffed significantly due to the changes to the Katyusha salvo. So that's a really good thing, especially given how the rocket barrage is going to make good use of those additional dice as well. And that one that is really significantly buffed is the Tunguska Sky Cruiser, which has been reduced by a hefty 18 points and can now actually also be fielded into squadrons of 4 of them. So they really have become the Kutsovs of the skies. And let's not forget that Patron, Blomqvist, who allows you to take some of these units into every battle fleet that you want to take. So there's really an option there to just go ahead and have amazing flexibility with these ships. And there we have it. That's all of the changes in the Commonwealth Orbat. Overall, I think this faction really is in a good state. It already was, kind of, previously in 3.03, if you ask me. And with these changes and some very hefty points reduction to some of the units that were less frequently taken, I think this faction overall is in a very, very good spot. I mean, all of the nerfs that happened were in line with what you expect from other factions, so there were no real surprises there. And overall, the stuff that has gotten weaker was the sort of stuff that needed to get weaker, and the stuff that got much stronger was the stuff that you weren't taking anyway. So good changes, I think, overall. But let me know in the comment section what you think. If you're a Commonwealth player, you disagree, you agree, make sure you sound off in the comments. Make sure you leave a like on the video as well, that helps with the visibility overall of the channel. And I hope to see you in the next update. Bye!